Hey everybody, welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. It has been a while since we've done any sort of AARs in the last little while, so the three of us are going to kind of discuss that. But while we're getting into it, y'all should get into it too. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff to get your emails in the morning whenever we go live, which is, of course, every day. Now, um, as I said a little while ago, we are going to be doing a bit of an AR, but it's going to be based around building digital communities, which is kind of what we've been trying to do throughout our time here on the collective. We have a few A teams out and around the country, Corey being one of them. So I'm very excited to get into this. Um, any thoughts or anything before we dive into the conversation?
I do have a quick thought. I've just noticed that hanging just above my head are two books
There are.
that I forgot I placed there in my live IG chat about an hour ago because the freaking sun was streaming in so much. I was like, I can't stand this streaming light anymore. I'm going to block it. So I grabbed two random books and they're blocking the light. So you're welcome.
Random books.
I swear. I just grabbed two books. I need a big one. And what's right next to it? Oh, there's another biggish one.
There you go. I do love that they are the perfect books for this
They
particular
kind of
type
are,
of
aren't they?
conversation. They
Yeah.
really are, yeah.
Yeah.
So now, if you guys do have any of the viewers, if you have any thoughts, questions, or comments, by all means, put them in the comment section. I forgot to mention that earlier. We do engage them regularly. Normally, Corey would be here to hit us up with the first comment, but he's here,
It's true.
so he can't really comment for us. But
Not even a good morning from him.
not
How
even a
rude.
Good morning, everybody.
Oh, thank you.
There it is. I feel better now that that's covered. So let's get into the conversation. Like I said earlier, we're going to be doing a bit of an after action review, a bit of a chat, but really what we're going to talk about is, what we have coming down the pipe, what to look forward to, and all that good stuff. So initially, as with any AR, any points to improve, points to sustain, anything like that. I'm going to start with Corey because you've been able to watch and be a part of it and watch at the same time. So, what are your thoughts initially on where we are and what we've done?
I think that as the collective has moved forward, it's improved, it's gotten better. And I think that with the community engagement, especially, it's developed layers, as it was over just the two of you talking, for instance, or bringing experts on. I think that you've developed a depth there that is valuable, not only to the community but moving forward. Now, I have a question for you though, Chance. How do you feel your role has changed over that time? And if it hasn't, why not?
That's a very good question. Now,
Oh, the shoe is on the other foot.
this actually kind of reminds me when we were on Eric's show, and it was a little bit weird not running the show. I kept wanting to ask questions or engage him on stuff, and I was like, but no, it's not my show. So I would say the biggest thing is that I have found my place in the actual show itself. I have really focused on the moderation side of it rather than being engaged in the conversation. Initially, Shaun and I had a number of conversations about this. Was I I really wanted to be a part of the conversation, but by being a part of the conversation, I wasn't paying attention to the moderation of the show as to making sure everybody got time to speak, making sure the comments got up. I was more concerned with listening and being in the conversation than it was being outside the conversation. And so over the span of the last 9 months and change, I have really harnessed the ability to moderate. And I've just focused on that specifically. So there's been many times where I've wanted to say something that I haven't, and I've let the guests really shine, because that's the point, is to let the my opinion on the things are not the important thing right now. The reason we bring other
Mm.
people onto the show is the fact that they have the opinion outside of mine, and that's the important piece of it. So by focusing on the moderation of it all and the running of the show, we've been able to really kind of find our niche where I can kind of ask a question, Shaun can expand on it, and then I can add a little tidbit, or I can go to another person, or I can go from there. So it's much more of a support role, which kind of irked me a little bit initially. It played off my ego a little bit.
Loser.
But now,
so to follow up on
that poor ego.
that poor ego, right?
So to follow up on that, then, if you feel that you've got a very stable base now, you've got some set of skills, how do you gamify that? How do you step it up? What's the next step?
This is the next step. Is the fun part. This is where I started doing the theme weeks, the scheduling, the making sure that I can beat what I was doing last time. So Coaches Week, as an example, right? Next week is Coaches Week, or not next week. The week after is Coaches Week. The first time we did it, I think we had actually a total of 19 unique coaches, but I had 20 overall coaches because we had a couple of people repeat through the week. So I guess it would, anyway, doesn't matter. But this Coaches Week, I'm doing 21 specifically. I'm making sure that I have 3 unique coaches every day along the way. So that's where that portion comes into it. And then the gamifying it in the show, like in these moments right here, it's more about how do I get the guests to start playing off of each other so that Shaun and I don't have to engage them on all the time. I can kind of let them run 2-3 times back and forth before engaging Shaun or coming back to a different question or going to a comment. So that's the gamifying portion of it.
So that falls into my next follow-up question for you again. What are you now expecting from your guests? Because I think you've had a significant amount of guests, some pretty great guests, if not all of them. What are you now demanding? And I know that's a very harsh term, but it holds a certain amount of accountability for your guests that are coming on. What are you expecting from them?
I would say personally what I expect from them is to be able to hold their space. That's the big one. And there's been some challenges on that front where I've had to kind of like lead people into a conversation or lead people into a thought pattern or things like that, or I've had to engage Shaun initially to kind of build upon a thought a couple of times before we get to that person being able to bring their opinion forward. But as of recently, we haven't had to do that much. It's been we've kind of engaged the conversation immediately, and people just kind of hold their space, and which is really neat. The thing that I've noticed in the last little while is people start to disagree. And so it's not just a bunch of people kind of nodding their heads. Well, I come from this side of the fence, and I come from this side of the fence, but we can still discuss it without any sort of real emotional attachment to it. Have you noticed that, Shaun? Anything like that?
Yeah, for sure. You're describing it as I see it as well, and I don't want to say too much more because Corey's on a freaking roll, and I love how this game is being played right now. So right back to you, Chance.
Thanks. Does that answer your question, Corey, or is there you got to follow up to the follow up to the follow up?
I don't think it's a follow-up to a follow-up. I know for me, what I do, and it's more who I am, is I'll sit and think as much as I can on the topic. I'll jot down some notes. I'll do some research, even if I don't use that. I want to make sure that I have that. That's what I do for a pre-prep. But I also want to make sure that I'm listening to the guests as well. Like you said, for that point where I'm not just listening to respond, but I'm absorbing what they're saying and then contributing to that conversation. So while you're having people disagree, do you think that there's a way that you can get people to stay on a main topic rather than diverge off onto disagreements, for instance?
That has been a challenge since the beginning, actually, is to try to not prevent, but mitigate the tangents. But the interesting part actually has been the fact that the tangents from certain topics or a disagreement where it kind of takes us into left field have brought us into some of the most interesting conversations that I think we've ever had. And that falls back into what I've had to reintegrate into my own self, is that by being the moderator, I can't allow myself to follow those trains of thought too far, and I can't let me rephrase. I don't allow myself to get sucked into those rabbit holes. And so, start hitting a tangent and we'll go down that road for maybe 2 or 3 comments and I'll be like, and back to what we were talking about here to bring us back to the original topic. But I think those tangents are useful because they help, expand the actual understanding of the topic itself. Because we talk about some pretty in-depth topics and we really just kind of skirt the surfaces on a lot of them. We just finished 5 days of talking about tools and vices. And we probably could talk about it some more, but I figured that the way we ended it yesterday was a pretty solid conclusion or a pretty solid base for anybody that doesn't really know anything about vices or tools. In which case, that's why we engaged today, being a little bit different. But at least that's where I'm going with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Now, for those sort of tangents that really start getting interesting that you steer away from, what are you doing for community engagement? So you have something on vices, you have something on 5 days of that, and there's a really interesting tangent that comes up. Are you giving the community or the people that are viewing this podcast a chance to explore that further and maybe voice to you that they'd be interested in that particular tangent? Do you have something set up that's going to allow you to have that communicated to you as the moderator? So something after the fact, we talked about this, what are you interested in? Like, were you interested in this tangent? Were you interested in this tangent? I don't know exactly how to do it, but just a thought, if people are interested in it, are you having that communication back to you saying, hey, I really like this, loved your topic, but I really like this and think you should delve into that?
One of the things I've noticed actually is that I don't get as much feedback as you would think. Shaun gets a lot of feedback, actually. A lot of people go to him to give the feedback for the show itself. And topics and things like that usually get brought to Shaun, in which case he then redirects them to me, and then we can engage them that way. But I don't get a lot of feedback. I think in the last, I'd say maybe a month, I think I've gotten 4 or 5 direct messages, like DMs, of feedback as per the show.
Why do you
not.
think that is?
I think Shaun is the main speaker. He's the talent of the show, right? And so I think that usually is the. And I know you're giggling inside your head, Shaun. I can see it. But I think that's the draw, right? People are here to watch Shaun. They're not here to talk to me. And as much as I'm part of the show, that's cool. I have no issue with that. It's the fact that usually the person that they want to engage with is that guy right there, Shaun. Does that seem about right? Or Corey, what do you think?
Well, I was going to say, so based off of that, and sorry, that guy there being the talent, and that guy being the one who's engaged. I know Shaun has brought it up a few times recently. But what happens if Shaun isn't quite in the picture as much anymore? What happens then? How do you pick up that slack?
I think I'd have to find new talent. Because
Congratulations, Corey.
There you go. You're now the one in charge. No, I think eventually, Shaun and I have talked about this a number of times, and we've tried to create. We don't want to make this the Shaun and Chance show, right? So that nobody else could engage this, or that if I got hit by a bus, the show would stop. Like, we don't want that to happen. We want to be able to start engaging other people so that we can create digital community. That's the whole point of the show, right? And I think we're starting to do that. We're starting to see that. I mean, you got your podcast. We got Dave and Allie with the Ruck and Rise podcast. We got lots of people who are starting to create their initiatives, starting to develop their worlds, where there will be a point where Shaun disappears or I disappear. But I think that the collective will continue in that it is a community-based project. Shaun, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree to some capacity. I expect it will continue on in some form. I'm not sure if it will consider itself as the collective if Chance and I both disappeared simultaneously. I hope it does or did or will. But my concern, my risk level on the collective not being successful is it still feels a little It doesn't feel as robust as it needs to be right now in order to move into the future and be successful, irrespective of what happens. And so I do push Chance a fair bit on this subject of who's going to take over if I disappear, or not take over. That's a poorly chosen phrase. I would say who is going to take my place, because to take over makes it sound like I'm actually running something, which I'm not. I'm co-hosting this with Chance, and his job nowadays is actually more important than my job over here, I feel. At the start of this, I was shaping things a whole lot more and barking a whole lot more. But now we've got a good rhythm. And I think that, as the guests have been saying, I mean, geez, just this week alone in the green room, I can think of a handful of guests each day after the podcast is done that they'll report how good the flow is right now, whether they're a first-time guest or a fourth or fifth-time return guest. The commentary is now, you guys have got a good rhythm. You're in the groove right now. It's really good. And I feel that is the case. I mean, there's always room for improvement. Always. But I think that we're doing pretty good. But now my concern is who to hand the keys off to if I died tomorrow. And that's always front and foremost in my mind. I committed to a full year over here on the collective. So as I was kind of imagining it in my mind, I was also committing to 365 days of effort. My wife keeps saying, you could take a day off. You could take a day off. But no, I can't, because I committed to every single day, and that's the deal. And that will be carved in stone. But come 2024 or January 1st of 2024, that deal is off. And so I'm not sure what 2024 will look like. Chance and I have talked about it to some degree. And generally speaking, what we're thinking about right now is maybe doing 2 podcasts per week, but each podcast is approximately 2 to 3 hours long. So we have some good guests and we have a good subject and we talk deeply about it for a long time. And if we do 2 podcasts a week, that'll be, solid, but we'll slice and dice that podcast up into maybe 20-minute or 30-minute segments, and that'll get released throughout the week each day, so that people can kind of keep up with the podcast if they want. I know myself, I struggle to keep up with all of the podcasts that my friends are on, to listen to my friends that I'm trying to gain wisdom from, stay in touch with, understand how they're thinking so that I can understand my own thinking. So I can barely keep up with my own podcasts and my friends' podcasts. So I think for podcasting right now, for the collective, I know there's a ton of people out there who hit me all the time saying how great it is, but they don't listen to every episode, nor would I expect them to. But I do know this, that anyone who has listened to every episode, and I can think of a few key people, and Corey, I know early on you were listening to most of the episodes, if not all of the episodes. What has always been reported to me, always the same thing. Man, that really helped me. And so whether they sat down and listened to a full month or they've sat down and listened to a full half year, whatever the case is, some consistency of listening every day. Currently in my mind, I'm thinking of Salty Jinx. He tunes into every single episode and self-reports that it's really helped him out. And I think all of these episodes, if you're consistent with them over a period of time, will create a really positive framework for forward momentum. But it's hard to commit to an hour every day, especially when you're not sure as to whether it'll even be helpful. And here's the trick, I feel. There's so many podcasts out there that so many people have listened to, and then at the end of the podcast, they're no better for it. They might have been entertained, but they didn't come away any wiser. So right from day one, I was trying to focus on the wisdom, not the entertainment. Maybe one day we'll be entertaining, but for right now, I just prefer to be tossing out the wisdom from the guests. So anyone who tunes into this podcast usually comes away a bit better. But if they haven't ever tuned into this podcast, they can't understand how consistency of listening over a few weeks or a few months will make them better. So how to explain that? I don't know. Corey, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I was trying to think. Obviously, I had a little bit more free time recovering from surgery to listen to the podcast, and I really enjoyed it. And I think probably the one thing that I found is, even though with your sort of varied backgrounds and Shaun, all of your accomplishments, it was very easy to relate to you. It was unassuming is probably the easiest thing that I would say. And that doesn't mean that it's not value added. It just means that I felt that it was very easy to come in. It was like, you come into a room, somebody says, "Hey, why don't you sit down?" And you can easily enter into a conversation. You don't feel like you need to prove anything. That's what I got out of it. I don't know if other people got out of it. So it was very easy to absorb the wisdom, as you say, that was um, being provided by the guests, because I didn't feel like I needed to measure up to the people in the room. I could take their wisdom, I could take what they were saying and absorb it into my own life. That was a real benefit early on, for me, anyways.
I like that. Now, the Chris actually jumped in here. He put a comment on here. He says, "No, the data shows people engage more with Chance than Shaun at twice the engagement rate." I'm not sure how he measures that, but if that's the way it is, so be it. The interestingly enough, honestly, the initially the show
I
was
disagree. Twice as much? I think it's at least 3 or 4 times as much. At least from my analysis over here that I just did a second ago.
you did a second ago. The interesting thing I was going to say is the fact that the show used to be was the challenge for me initially. So the first few months was me just trying to like figure out how the show was going to work, and then we started getting guests, and then I was like, well, but then there's these conversations, and as we evolved, it became more and more challenging to kind of maintain. And one of the things that I thought was interesting was that we've probably been hit with this a number of times in the last little while was, you guys do this every day? We were like, both John are like, yep, every day. And they're like, wow, that's like good job on the consistency. And then I can't remember who it was, but somebody was like, so how much time do you spend scheduling? And I was like, I think Shaun laughed and was like, none. And I said, all the time, all the time. And instead of the show being the challenge of just me trying to actually manage the show itself, the show is now kind of, it's like it's similar to the concept of the competition that Shaun was talking about, right? The competition is that day that you worked for to get to the day, and it happened. Cool. What's next? And that's kind of what I'm at now. So every day I do the show, I'm like, okay, the show's over. Awesome. Okay, what's next? And I start working on the next 6, 7 things, 10, 9 things, whatever I got to do for scheduling wise. Like, as an example, I'm looking at my book and I got Coaches Week already laid out, and I'm short 5 coaches to make 21 already. And I already have videos coming in from people, which I need more of. So if you're out there watching, shoot me more videos because I need more. But it's interesting to see how my understanding of how I'm actually doing the show itself has evolved over time, if that makes any sense. I'm what are you giggling about? What do you got, Shaun?
It has evolved. You're welcome. Because I have been a relentless caveman with my very large club.
It's true.
So what Chance isn't stating is how much he's had to work in the background and how ferocious I've been with my big caveman club. Because it's not about Chance doing better. It's not about Shaun doing better. It's about the collective doing better. And because of that, like, I was going to say, don't get in my way, but that sounds too aggressive. But in the spirit of things, that's how I think. I think there's a really big problem out there. We're trying to be helpful, and I will not spare any expense when it comes to time, because I've got limited time, and therefore I will set a ferocious pace, which means there's consequences constantly. And that's a different way to run things than, you know what, we'll just try again tomorrow, and I hope it all works out tomorrow. I don't subscribe to the hope thing. What I do subscribe to is we kind of blew that. That'll never happen again. Frickin' ever. And Chance is on board with that. I'm on board with that. Any minor mistakes we make are instantly corrected, and we refuse to do that same mistake again. We are over here pushing the pace, which means that I'm pushing the pace on Chance. He's pushing the pace on me to some degree, but I feel that the ratio is unfair. I'm probably hitting Chance with about 90%, and he's hitting me with about 10%.
That's all right.
But that's what's required right now. That is what is required. And Chance, I was going to say God bless him, but we're not really religious over here. But Chance has taken on a lot. He's taken on a lot of my velocity, my directed velocity. And, there's not a whole lot of people that would have, perhaps, because I am freaking relentless. I know I say it all the time, but I don't think people understand until they start working with me how much of a handful I am. But I'm a freaking handful that creates results. And I'm not sure Chance would have signed on January 1st if he would have known what he was into. When I duly warned him before we went live, and I said, dude, you better be prepared to freaking hang on, because I'm going to set a pace that you've never felt before. And I think he kind of laughed. How's it going now, Mr. Laffy McLaugh? So I do set a pace. Awesome. And Chance managed to hang on. And that is uncommon nowadays. I do recall, it just popped into my head, we've had Pat Mack on, and we've had Metal Motivator.
CJ.
What's his? That's right, CJ.
Yeah.
That's right. So CJ, I do recall him being on our podcast, and we were kind of laughing. I'm not sure if it was in the green room or actually when we were live in the potty, but he was saying, I just want someone who can keep up with me. I want to work with someone who can keep up. I finally found it in Pat Mack. That's what he said I don't know if he said it live or green room. Anyway, that was his point.
But yeah.
And I've also heard him say it on his own podcast that it's really frustrating to work with people who think they're in the game, but they ain't in the game because they just don't understand the game. The game that I'm playing right now is Warp Factor 3. And if you're not used to Warp Factor 3, it's a problem. And so Chance wasn't ready for Warp Factor 3. But now we're seeing the stars shoot past us at Warp Factor 3, and it feels normal. So the Chance has gone through a very uncomfortable process where I've been making the abnormal normal. And that's just an old saying from Tier 1. Make the abnormal normal. Well, that's how I've been running my life ever since I left Tier 1. It doesn't matter if I'm working with athletes or someone I'm coaching or a friend. I treat the world like a Tier 1 project. And so Chance has been in it, and he's been on fire a number of times, dropping and rolling to put out the flames. But here he is, not even any smoke drifting off him right now, in the game, large and in charge and crushing it. And now Chance is doing things that have scaled up to such a degree that now Chance is irreplaceable. So all along the way, my task has been to create the best version of Chance for when I bounce on January 1st, 2024. Not knowing whether I'm going to bounce or not, because it all depends on how this year plays out in Chance. I swear. Am I making this up or not? I've looked you in the eye and said, if this thing ain't going right, I'm bouncing at the end of this year. Have I not said that?
A couple of times, yeah.
At least a couple. And sometimes with some ferocity. And so, bit, yeah. So, I mean, like, I keep it real. I make sure that everyone understands the importance of what we're doing. And then I hold people accountable, to include myself the most. And I have certain expectations, and Chance has met those expectations, sometimes begrudgingly and sometimes willingly. But here we are right now with a pretty freaking good platform, wondering what we're going to do in 2024.
Yeah, it's going to be neat. Corey, you got any thoughts?
Interestingly enough, as you pointed out, I started my own podcast, and I've found that challenging to build that digital community as we were talking about. But to relate it back to the collective, what have you found has been the reason that people tune into your podcast over another podcast? What sort of feedback are you getting, or where are you getting those metrics from?
Shaun, you're getting more feedback than I am, so
Yeah, I am getting a fair bit of feedback. And so before I jump into that, I do want to remind you, Chance, that Corey had brought up an excellent point, which is an actionable item that we need to make a strategic policy right now. And that is figure out a way to have you create engagement with the follow-on tangents that sometimes we get into, so that you can establish whether they are worthy of a full 1 hour episode, or if anyone had any tangential subjects that they wanted us to touch on, etc. So let's develop a tool whereby people can engage in that. Okay.
Raj, yep.
So where were we at? Talking about, what was the subject? Or I tangential
Why are
this?
people, yeah, no,
Oh, yeah,
why are
sorry.
people
Okay, right.
engaging into your podcast over another, or picking yours first with the limited amount of time they have in a day?
Right. So, I don't think we have much of a following over on the collective. I think it's quite small. In fact, it's disappointingly small in context of the information that is being handed out by the guests. I find that the collective's content is far better than a lot of podcasts out there that have way more traction. And is that unfair to contextualize against someone else's podcast? Well, I didn't use any names. I'm just saying that we have some good content over here. I'm not saying that theirs is worse and their name is ... because the names aren't important. Contextually, we're doing some pretty good stuff over here, but it is not seeing the footprint that it should based on the level of guests and their wisdom that they're bringing over here. So that is disappointing to me. And I feel that it should be better. And I think that's mostly our fault because we still haven't figured out a way to gain general traction into the general demographic, because we don't have a marketing budget. We don't have any budget at all. And so a lot of platforms out there grow their footprint through marketing, of which we've done hardly any, other than word of mouth or a little bit of organic. We're pushing some content out to try to expand that footprint, but without a penny to rub together, the marketing budget, as it were, things don't move very quickly without a budget. And so that's on us, but there's nothing to change that other than to keep having great guests and keep doing what we're doing. And whether this generation or the next generation tunes into the collective is something that I can't control, but without a budget, it's not going to get the eyeballs on it that I think it deserves. So, to your question, my answer would be I don't think it's being seen enough. Now, in my DMs on Instagram, I do get a lot of feedback from the episodes. And it's quite uncommon if I don't get at least 4 or 5 or 6 people each day giving me some kind of feedback. And sometimes I push the feedback over to Chance because I know he's not getting hit over there. And I think that I'm getting feedback just because I have an IG account that has some sort of social interaction, and I make myself available. I categorize myself as hit me up on any subject at any time, and I'll do my best to help you, as I do every single day. So maybe I'm being connected with because I'm creating a two-way highway. And maybe that's something that the collective needs to do better, is to create a two-way highway. Maybe, I don't know. Chance, what do you think?
I'm not sure on that one. More along because I do respond quite often when people either message me or when they message the collective's IG account. I think a lot of it. And I mean, we started when we first started. We had this conversation and we were talking about, what's the biggest draw? Well, right now, special forces guys are the biggest draw, right? People want to hear what special operators want to talk about. That's usually you see it all over the internet. Is special operator this, special operator that. This guy did these things, and I think that was one of the big draws. But I think that's why you're getting the communication is it's a two-way highway. You respond immediately and you can engage with people quite regularly, but people want to talk to you specifically because of your background versus the collective's account or me. Just
Yeah,
based on
that's
the
true.
background. I think that's right. I think
Yeah, that's true.
what the issue is, but
So with that said, maybe I'm creating a bit of a problem for us. Maybe just a random thought that I'm throwing out there in real time. So people do connect to me because of special operations or because of my background or my careers or whatever. But the interesting thing is that over here on the collective, I'm not interested in people's backgrounds. I don't, when they show up, I just want to hold up a sign that says, we ain't going to talk about all of the things that you did back in the day. We're going to talk about you now. I want to get to know the human today, not the human from 20 years ago. Now their experiences, their background, all the things they've learned, the wisdom, that's all good stuff. That all plays into the conversation of today, where I'm trying to learn things from them today, not learn things from them from 20 years ago. And I know it's hard to articulate my interests on a person on our panel each day, but I'm trying to learn the person in the real time as they exist in the real time, not the person as they existed 20 years ago. Now, we do move back and forth on timelines to better understand the person, but I am interested in the now of the panel. And that's a tricky one to play with. And so, I'm saying that people will come over to the collective because of titles, but I ain't interested in titles. I'm just interested in cool people. So maybe I'm causing as a problem. I'm not sure.
I think it. This is I think this is the biggest challenge is that the way in which you think is not the way in which most people think. And
Well,
so
that's true.
For
It's caused me problems all my life.
Right? And for you want to hear about the person right now. You want to talk to that person because they're a cool person. You want to have that conversation in the real time right now. But I think for a large span of the population who have no background in either military or doing hard things or pushing their body or doing any of that stuff, they just see almost a pedestaled person, a person on a pedestal. That's what I mean. So like, when we had Pat Mack, and I think the first thing I did was I was like, sweet, I got Pat Mack. I was excited. Like, yeah, that's awesome. But the first time we talked to him, he's just a regular dude. And it was cool to talk to, and it was relaxed, and it was chill, and there wasn't any of that pomp or circumstance that, I think a lot of people kind of throw at the feet of anybody that's done stuff that's really hard. Like Pat Mack or any of the other guys on Delta or JTF2 or SAS or any of those guys, right? There's a knowledge of how hard it is, but there is a complete, well, they have zero knowledge of how hard it is. They have an idea of how hard something like that is without any real knowledge of it, if that makes sense. I think that's the draw, is where people look at someone like you, Shaun, or they look at someone like Pat Mack, or they look at someone like Dean Stott, and they're just like, wow, without any further thought beyond that of like, how do I get there? They just, wow, that would never happen for me, so therefore I'm going to put this person on a pedestal because they don't give themselves the same level of I can't think of the word right now, but you guys get
self-worth.
Right? Self-worth. There you go. Yeah.
Well, if you recall when you said you got Pat Mack on, or Pat Mack was going to show up, and you're super giddy, I was like, dude, he's just another dude. He's just another human being. When he shows up, I'm going to just treat him like another guy. In fact, I won't treat him special at all. And that's the way I like to do it over on the collective. I don't name the most large and in charge person in the world. I said this to my wife just a few days ago. Name the biggest person in the world. If we had them on the podcast, I'd treat them just like I treat anyone. Because the air of importance skews a conversation. And so I'm interested in learning something myself. I'm interested in the other person learning something as well. But most of all, I'm interested in the audience coming away better for it, for having given their hour of their life to the collective in order to gain something from it. So the pomp and circumstance of someone telling a story that lasts 45 minutes long from 37 years ago, it just doesn't appeal to me. Those are called historical podcasts, where you tune in to listen to history. But I ain't interested in focusing on the history. I'm interested in focusing on the wisdom now that was learned through history. So I don't need the long song and dance story. What I do need is the wisdom from the long song and dance story, but distilled into the now.
I do. Yeah, that makes 100%. I got a comment here. Corey, you got any thoughts before I hit this comment?
It was a bit of a step back from what you guys were saying, but I know that you were mentioning a little while ago the difference between not having any marketing budget and thinking that that would maybe perhaps help you out in getting your numbers that you want. When I think of things, when you mention like Pat Mack, for instance, massive, massive online digital community, to draw it back to what we're saying, massive. Now, how much of that is he using marketing for, or how much of that is that he's just being available to the people and showing them things? So, is there a difference between exposure and marketing? And if there is, can you increase your exposure without having to actually dip into marketing?
That's an interesting question. And
Yeah,
Shaun, what do you got?
it's a tricky one. So I think that unless you've got a huge marketing budget, and by huge I mean like way too much money, because you're going to waste a lot of it. I nowadays I've seen statistics that 90% of your marketing budget is flushed down the toilet, and you might see a 10% result out of that 100% effort. And so I'm not willing to spend that kind of money frivolously, irrespective of any guarantees from any marketing company out there. I just don't care. I don't want to spend money, or more correctly, I don't want to flush it down the toilet to create more eyeballs on the product over here. The best way I can explain that is I'm offended with just the thought of buying followers. So lots of people have hit me up in the past. Hey, you know what? If you spend $100, you can get 1,000 followers. I'd rather spend $100 to lose 1,000 followers than buy 1,000 followers. It just seems so disingenuous. It feels so contrived and fake and inauthentic that I just won't do it. I won't sell out that way. I won't buy followers. I won't spend a boatload of money to move half an inch down the pipeline when I know that just hard work will move us down the pipeline. And that way I feel like it's being earned rather than bought. And that's maybe a character flaw of mine, that I've run a lot of my life through that motto of earned, not bought. And I think that there's a little bit of a problem out there in society right now in digital communities, where some of those communities have been bought, not earned. And I don't subscribe to that lifestyle or that way of running a program. So I don't have a solution for the collective. We don't have money for the collective, and therefore we probably will grow quite slowly.
That's okay though. I honestly, I've said this a number of times before, is that we've only been going for 9 months, like most podcasts, right? Like this is, and we're not superstars. We don't have a massive following to begin with. We're both just regular dudes, and we have our own small followings that we have, that when we got started we're been utilizing as best as we can. So the fact that it's only been 9 months and change, we're doing pretty well. I gotta say, for most podcasts in 9 months, the fact that we've put out 278 friggin' podcasts since the beginning of the year, that is unheard of that I've ever seen in podcasting.
Yeah, it's true. But you know what it's like
Oh yeah,
with me.
oh yeah.
That's not good enough.
I know all too well. No, I had a comment here. Vanessa Chaos jumps in. She says Shaun's IG lives are definitely a reason I've messaged him with feedback. Not a case of preferring to interact with one more than the other. His account just seems more forefront in my mind as it pops up more in my feed. So that's a great point. In that the IG, or the collective's IG account, the only time I'm posting on that is when we have, like, during the episodes. So, and the clips afterwards, but I don't like post on it regularly, which I probably should do more.
Well, Vanessa is right. And listen, Chaos Customs Wood and More, I appreciate you joining me in my IG lives, and I appreciate you joining us here, because this is the kind of feedback that means the most to me. It's people that have been in the game with us for a while, and they know the deal, and that kind of feedback to me is legit. So I am pretty active in my IG account, just trying to create exposure for the collective, trying to expose myself to the world so the world is aware of the collective, as it were. And so I am pretty engaged for me on social media. So maybe Vanessa's right. It's time to figure out how to make the collective a little bit more interactive with the interwebs.
Corey, what do you got? What are you thinking?
Well, I was going to say, I know Shaun's been on several podcasts, and as he said, he's growing that exposure for the collective. But when I think about it, other than chats that we've had in the green room, I know almost nothing about you, Chance. How open are you to putting yourself out there, maybe separate from Shaun, to grow the exposure to the collective and going on somebody else's podcast just to talk about your experiences?
I'm always happy, and I've been on a number of them, and I'm happy to expose anything and everything that anybody would like to see. Let me put it that way. The initially this is an interesting point, but when I first started getting into advocacy way back in like 2015, was the thing that I said to myself, the promise I made was that I will be absolutely open and honest about everything that I put forward. So at any point in time, if anybody wants to be on or wants me on a podcast, I am more than happy to be on it, and I'm more than happy to talk about my background and where I come from. It is I've told this story a couple of times. Is the fact that I had a conversation with my granddad. He did not talk about his experiences in the war in World War II at all for his entire life. And it was only after I got back from Afghanistan that him and I had a conversation. We actually sat down and it wasn't much of a conversation, but it was a little bit. And I saw a little bit of weight come off of his shoulders after that conversation. And it was in that moment that I was like, I am never going to be that guy. So I'm going to be as open and honest as I possibly can about all of my experiences across the board. And since then, I have been, as far as I know.
So interesting. Maybe you don't have to respond to this or not, but it's just a random thought based on the logical train of thought. So when I first met you, you might have been willing to go on any podcast and be open and transparent, but you just didn't have your act together. But now you do.
Very true.
So the things that you were talking about were totally distorted because your sense of yourself was wrong because you had it twisted. But now you're looking back over the last year and you can see that. I mean, this is what you've self-reported to me. So it's not like I'm making this up. I mean, your sense of who you are now and your sense of how to tell your story appropriately and your sense of the lessons that you've learned by reflecting back through your own time spent in your own self-reflection. Dude, you're a different person in front of a microphone now, and how you relay the lessons that you've learned. You've now got wisdom. A year ago, your wisdom sucked because you couldn't even be wise to yourself. Now, tell me I'm wrong.
No, you're absolutely right. 100%.
So, you're out there on podcasts kind of not doing a great job, maybe, but you were trying your best. It's just that you didn't see it. And lots of people don't. Dude, you know how much I sucked when I jumped in front of a microphone. And I still suck, but I'm getting better at trying to tell the story, whatever the story is that we're telling that day. And so you're way better at it now than even just 2 months ago. So just maybe you just need to think about, you've been on some podcasts. You stunk up the place. Get back on some podcasts and straighten out the record,
Raj. Okay. Well, if anybody's listening out there,
I don't know. Don't.
Podcast,
what do you think? Yeah. What do you think? I mean, what are your thoughts on it?
I agree. I do agree. The my ability to actually engage in the conversation is much improved than it used to be. And I'm thinking back on some of the podcasts that I've been on over the years, and they've been it's been mostly me complaining more than
Yeah.
anything.
Did you complain more than anyone else when I first met you? I mean, it was relentless.
Yeah, it was. It was consistent. And now after understanding, not just, I read Jocko's book, The Extreme Ownership, as well as The Dichotomy of Leadership, which is up on the shelf in Sean's, or up in the window.
Up on the
Sean's
window.
But I didn't really understand it until we started working the collective. And that's where it started to make sense in terms of, it wasn't just a philosophical concept of like, oh, I'm going to take ownership of this. It's like, no, this is my problem to fix. Good. Okay, now I can fix it. And I've started engaging in that process through the year. And as you said, in the last couple of months, it was actually, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, I made a realization, and I was talking about this on Eric's podcast, and the fact that I asked for it. This is what I wanted. I wanted to be a podcaster. So any of the work that's in front of me that is involved in the podcast, this is what I asked for. And not only should I be excited about doing the work, not only should I not be beat down by the amount of work that's in front of me, I should be excited about it. This is what I asked for. And so I've taken that attitude into everything, into my relationship with my wife. I've taken it into my relationship with my kids. I've taken it into my time on the mats. I've taken it on to dealing with my injured shoulder, all of this stuff. I asked for it. This is what I want. This is what I wanted. So yeah, let's get after it. And now I'm getting after it. So this is
Yeah, you are. Yeah, what you just said is so on point. And I'll paraphrase what I've seen. You did read all the books. You did read The Dichotomy of Leadership. Academically.
Yes.
You finished the book, but you never understood the book. You read it because you thought you were understanding it through words, but words don't mean anything until you apply action. And the moment that you start applying action against that book, well, now you're on the right path. But that action is not just, I did some action today, now I get the book. That action is like what Chance has just gone through. A hellacious process of grind. And the amount of hellaciousness that you're willing to take on is the reduced timeline that you're going to get better. So if you want it all, if you want all the ferocity of fixing yourself, well, you'll fix faster, maybe, if you don't break. So it's for all of us to take these kind of books, The Dichotomy of Leadership or Building the Elite, just over my head there, taking these kind of things and not just reading them and then checking the box and thinking, I'm one book better. Because the book ain't the fix. The book is just the signpost. The action is the fix. And Chance got to work some time ago, and now his action is paying off. It's so easy to see now. And the cool part about action is it builds on itself, which I've been seeing Chance do for the last few months. By the end of this year, it'll be ridiculous. Maybe I'll be trying to keep up to you. But that's just the way it goes, man. That is the way it goes. I'm barely kidding on that. Momentum is a thing. Forward momentum has a lot of power. And so I've had a certain forward velocity for a long time. But if you really bear down, Chance, and sort of, I'm not saying double your efforts, but really kind of turn up the rotary dial on forward momentum, your forward momentum will be more than mine is. Because mine's been established so long, I'm getting half-inch increments every day. You'll be getting 4.5 feet increments every day based on where you were and where you're going. Now, eventually, that all scales off and it slips into the half an inch every day.
Mm-hmm.
But you've got a lot of ground to cover, and you're covering it fast, and it's impressive to see. So, again, by the end of this year, you could be moving faster than I am.
That could be interesting. Corey, you got any thoughts on any of this?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Shaun was saying, and that was sort of back to my original point, is that I've also noticed that as well. And I think that by putting yourself back out there again, I think the quality of the product that you're putting out, as in yourself, will be much easier digested and absorbed, and people will want more, right? So just don't be afraid of that. And just because you've done it once doesn't mean that you're not going to do it again better.
Oh, that's a great point. And it actually goes into what Shaun's point was as well, and the fact that I did check off the boxes. Right, these are the books that I should read. Check, read it. Okay, move on to the next one. Check, read it. Oh, I've done this podcast. Check, done. We're good to go. There was never any like going back to it. Let's check on this again. Let's read this book again. Let's read it a third time. Let's see how I can integrate the points better. Is my understanding of it different now? That kind of stuff. So I think you guys are absolutely right, and I'm ready to head into it. Let's get to work.
Do you know the other thing is, yeah, you did ask for it, and you're getting it, and now you get to put it out there. Is how much more confident you are, because you can go into a podcast, and if you don't have self-worth, if you don't have the confidence, if you don't feel like if you're a better person than last time you're on, well, you're still stinking up the place. But you please tell me that you feel a whole lot better about who you are as a person versus January 1st.
100%.
So that should take you into these podcasts. Yeah, for sure. Almost an order of magnitude. So this should take you into these podcasts feeling like a successful human being, like a confident, capable human being who's come a long way and has a few things to say. Now, the weird part is, a few years ago when you're on podcasts, you had too much to say. Maybe when you're on podcasts now, you'll have less to say, but it'll have more meaning.
It's a great point, and it's funny you mentioned that, because I was just thinking about, again, for those that don't know, we were on the Blue Grit Wellness podcast with Eric Tung a couple of days ago.
Yeah, that was fun.
Won't come out for a while, and it was a good conversation. We had a blast.
Actually, it was a blast.
I had a blast on it. Like, right? Yeah. It was so much. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, it was just like kind of hanging out in I don't know, Comedy Central in LA, just kind of chirping back and forth. I mean, we had some serious moments, but overall, it was a pretty fun chat. We went over 2 hours, but
2 hours and change. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a good chat.
It was. The funny part was I think we were laughing for a good probably 5 or 6 minutes total over that whole. Like, we just spent a lot of time laughing. Anyway, the point I was going to make was the fact that during that conversation, there was a lot of point in time where I just sat back and listened. Like, I had things to say, but they weren't really all that relevant. So I was just I would allow you to talk, and I would allow Eric to talk, and then I would kind of sit there and just listen and focus, rather than previous podcasts that I've been on. I've always been like waiting for the question. As soon as that question ended, I was like, boom, I was on it, and I was all of the stuff that I had rehashed previously, versus taking the second to really capture what the question is about. I was just listening to the question itself and then responding, versus what is this person actually trying to figure out? What is the point that they're trying to make with this question, and then I can relay that information, rather than just plaster a ton of information and hope that somebody else gets it. So it's been really interesting.
Here's a little twist for you, just a little word play. You can take it or leave it. But how I try to think of things over here in the collective, or when I'm on a potty or whatever the case is, you use the incorrect word. You're allowing them to talk, which sucks as a word. What you can do is change it to, I'm enjoying them talking. And then when they stop, then you can decide whether you've got something relevant to say, versus I'm allowing them to talk. How magnanimous of you.
Well,
by royal decree, I'm allowing you to talk on your podcast.
Hold on a second while I mute Shaun for a second.
Very magnanimous.
No, you're absolutely right, though. That is a great clarification. And we've talked about this before. Words actually matter, and the way in which we utilize them matters. And you're right. It's just the concept of allowing someone to talk is incorrect. It is much more the fact that I was enjoying the conversation, and I didn't feel like it was needed that I was talking, versus when a question was asked me, I answered it, and then allowed the conversation to develop from I did it again. I did it again.
Because it's a thought construct in your mind that you've habitualized. These are the things that you've normalized. And now it's your job to make the abnormal normal. And the abnormal is to flippity flop it on its head. And instead of allowing me to talk, enjoying the talk. The enjoyment, it's a key word. It will completely change the way you act in a podcast.
I'm taking notes. Hold on a second while I write this down. While I do that, we are just about at an hour now. Actually, we're going to run over an hour here in a second. But any final thoughts on anything that we've talked about so far? I mean, we've talked about me quite a bit, but that was not the original plan. But I do appreciate.
I liked it. I thought it was good, man. Yeah,
I thought it was
Chance
pretty
Burles AAR. It was probably due. Everyone should know how much arse you're kicking.
I think it definitely is overdue. Corey, any final thoughts on anything we've gone over so far?
I think for the collective and as a community member of the collective, I think that I'd ask any of the members that are listening right now or listening later to, if you've gotten something out of this, if you've, it can be small, it can be huge, but try to magnify and multiply that. If you've received it from the collective, try to multiply and magnify it out. Try to physically let somebody know about the collective. There's one thing to sort of share a story on Instagram and leave it and walk away. But if you're getting something from it, big or small, try to see if somebody else can do that. So magnify, multiply, put it out there into the universe, go physically talk to people, bring it up with groups that you have, see if you can get people engaged. If they do one, they're probably going to do two. If they do two, they're probably going to do three. You get ownership of that person with the collective. They're then going to turn around and want it to be successful, and they'll tell more people.
Yeah, 100%. Shaun, any final thoughts?
I agree with Corey. It does take some form of personal responsibility in the engagement process. So enjoy the content, learn from it, become a better person for it, but do the rest of your friends a favor and make them aware of how it's making you better or your life improved. And I'll give you a quick example of this. I was out on the mountain bike trails a few days ago, and I just stopped to talk to a friend real quick. And a guy rode by on a bike with a bunch of people, and he looked over his shoulder and yelled back, "Hey man, I love the podcast. Keep on keeping on." And off he went. I don't know who he was. And I looked at my friend and said, "Do you know that guy?" And he said, "Oh yeah, he's ... and he's a really good athlete." And he said, "I didn't know he followed you." And I said, "Nor did I." And so it's interesting how people all around us on the social digital community or in our own communities may be tracking us without our awareness. And so I suppose we just keep on keeping on and encouraging other people to look over their shoulders and yell back, "Keep on doing what you're doing, fellas." That should be enough for us for now, maybe.
Yeah, I think so for sure. When I first got into advocacy stuff initially back in the day, one of the things that was going around the internet was, if Facebook disappeared, how much of an advocate would you be? And it always clicked in the back of my head was the fact that I need to be doing something physical in regards to advocacy, right? I need to be setting up, helping set up the walk, or I need to be answering phone calls in the middle of the night, or I need to be doing something. I need to physically be advocating for somebody rather than just posting stuff online, right? It's always great and it makes you feel good. And actually, Shaun and I, we had this conversation on the podcast as well as off. It's great to put up a Stoic philosopher's quote. Great. It's great to put up a quote from Miyamoto Musashi. It's great to put these out there as, hey, these things mean something to me. But without any sort of depth or without any sort of thought or without any sort of engagement of anybody else, it doesn't really move the needle in any direction. It's just like putting a poster on your wall. Huzzah! I have a poster on my wall, right? That doesn't enact action. It's like when I read a book without actually understanding the concepts behind it or applying those concepts into my life. Did I actually learn anything? Did I build anything from it? Did I grow as a person at all? Not until I put some action into it. So if y'all want to do some action, do it with us every day on the collective. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Chimo.
Chimo.